So welcome, Norman Horn, our resident Libertarian for the evening. Let's see what he has to say.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be back in my home state of Texas. I am actually an original Texan from Austin, and in fact, got my PhD there at University of Texas years ago. And it's actually where I started and founded the Libertarian Christian Institute, which is our mission is to equip Christians to promote a free society. Now, I have to go really fast, I'm sure, but I'm going to follow what you sent me in terms of the request of defining terms and answering some quick questions with regards to what we think as libertarians, and especially at LCI, about various terms and these things. So first off, we're going to be discussing a lot of vague terms tonight. One of those is just simply patriotism. And what is patriotism? Well, perhaps this is idiosyncratic, but bear with me here. I would suggest that patriotism is very simply a certain love and affection and preference for one's culture and place of origin. Like I said, I'm a Texan, doggone it, and I like it. And look, I've been here a long time, and I'm glad to be back. But you know, another gentleman, a certain congressman from Texas, one Ron Paul, once said, real patriotism is a willingness to challenge the government when it's wrong. Now, this indicates something to us that patriotism is more about sticking to principles than it is about other aspects. Now, if nationalism just stuck with the patriotism part, that little bit would go a really long way. But more typically, nationalists take it a step further. That little bit ceases to be particularly good when you use those loves as justification for committing acts of aggression against others for your own nation's good. Nationalism, in contrast to patriotism, seeks the aggressive advancement of its state at the expense of others. Now, this has particular things associated with it. Often, nationalists will be anti-free trade. They'll be anti-immigration. And this promotes a sense of entitlement mentality, not just about whether or not you get a handout from the government, but whether the government should be actively pushing down others from outside in order to promote you internally. And this also leads to a very militaristic mentality. And in fact, we often see that the most biggest swells of national sentiment is in celebration of militaristic victory. My bud Alex Nowrasta at Cato likes to say that there are three variants of modern nationalism everywhere. One, a government adopts the ideology to justify an increase in its power. Two, an outsider group within the state claims to represent the true nation. And three, an outsider group claims to represent a separate nation to build its claims to power or succession. Now, especially in the latter two cases, that outsider group in the nation is very often, an ethnic group that must advance at the expense of other groups. Sometimes that's an ethnic group in the state, and sometimes it's out. If it's out, maybe they're just taking it over. If it's in, maybe they're trying to take over inside. Now, while I appreciate how Christian nationalists recognize important problems in our society, we're very much in agreement that we need a church renewal, that we need to increase our theological knowledge. We have a lot of agreement there. But I would suggest that their proposed cure to Christianize these clearly problematic values that I previously mentioned is the weak point of it. And it is not the kind of Christian that we should want to be. Instead, we should be following Matthew chapter 20, where Jesus says, you know, the rulers of this world like to lord it over you, but you are not to act this way. And you remember the rest. You know the thing. When did seeking political power become part of our ethos as believers? Because we may have a dominion mandate, but dominion is not domination. So moreover, I would suggest that, as Nick suggested as well, that Christian nationalism seeks to create more crimes in the name of protecting particular Christian values. We see this in blasphemy laws, Sabbath laws, or these are what things that are suggesting. Laws against teaching literally non-approved teachings. And if you don't think I'm telling the truth, I've got the receipts. Okay, so Christian nationalism often enough is just trying to provide, in my opinion, a pseudo-intellectual cover for a Christian will-to-power conservatism, a la, various philosophers. And it's unbecoming as the methodology for Christian engagement in society. So I don't think we need to talk about exiting and parallel societies as cover for a plan, talking about how we're not going to do anything but just, circle the wagons, only to come up with a plan of attack to take over the world. That's with some so-called eschatology of victory, as Andrew Torba likes to talk about. So is Christian nationalism good or bad? Well, I think we can do a lot better. We can do that with better theology and better education in a lot of different areas. But abandoning nationalism and Christian nationalism, or even, dare I say, the whole left-right paradigm, doesn't mean we have to abandon political engagement altogether. And although I am very sympathetic to Nick's particular views, I think we can recast and understand politics in a particularly different way. I can't blame you for wanting to stay out of it entirely. It's pretty stupid. But nevertheless, I would call you to renew your minds and think a little differently. And this is what we try to do at LCI. And we have, by the way, I have about 70 books to give away. If you want them, you can have them. We've got some fun stuff for you. We'll be happy to give them to you. And we'll bring back more if you invite us back again. So I'm going to appeal to a different way to think and engage about politics. I'm going to actually go straight to our core values at LCI, as this is the basis of why we say that libertarianism is the most consistent expression of Christian political thought. First, Christian political philosophy should be informed by a holistic view of scripture, reason, and historical theology. As my father-in-law likes to say, the Bible doesn't teach you to bake a cake. He's also a Texan, by the way. Okay. And just like you can't expect me I'm a professional chemical engineer by trade, although I like to think I'm a theologian sometimes as well. I don't get my rules about quantum mechanics from the Bible. It doesn't happen. I don't get the theories of calculus or chemistry from the Bible. We have ample opportunity to learn from the natural world around us about how we are to behave, how we are to interact with each other. What is a better way of social organization? And we don't need to ape particular values in a particularly problematic way in order to, ham-fist our way into a Christian nation. A free and civil society depends upon respect for the non-aggression principle. That's our second core value. Now, what does that mean? It means that the initiation of force and fraud is unjustifiable, that people ought to be free to do what they will, provided that they're not initiating force and fraud against others. This is a pretty simple idea. Think about how the government operates, though. The state doesn't do that at all. Now, our third core value is that individual liberty and common good are not at odds. Contra the position that individualism is sinful, we would suggest that a proper understanding of individualism is how you begin to build healthy communities. We talk about a personal relationship with God all the time. That starts there. We can do better than trying to collectivize everything. Social institutions also matter for human flourishing. That's our value number 4. Contra the position that government is simply the name we give to the things we do together. Thanks, Barney, Frank, and Hillary. What really matters for human progress is not governmental authorities and governmental institutions, but institutions like marriages, families, churches, businesses, community clubs, which are all founded in mutual cooperation. The state is an unproductive and unessential predator and should be relegated to the dustbin of human history. So the Christian theology, this is our 5th point here, Christian theology affirms the essential tenets of free market economics. And yeah, I know we're not talking about, capitalism and whatnot, but contra our anti-capitalist friends, like our friends, theologians David Bentley Hart, or even the late Tim Keller, rest in peace, sir, there is without a shadow of a doubt that outside of the Lord's church itself, free market capitalism is the greatest boon to human flourishing in human history. And if that is the case, what is the government doing? Not much to promote that. Those are our values, and that's where we stand at LCI. Now, this doesn't mean that we get into party politics all the time. I'm not here to promote some big L ideology. This is about being small L libertarian and just being very simple in the way that we present ourselves. So one question that Sarah started us off with was, where does passion for politics for a candidate or party turn into idolatry? I would say very quickly. When we stick to principles and sound theology, though, we can completely avoid this kind of insanity. And I think that's a huge lesson that we can take from this. You don't have to be like the mob and go all mimetic on everyone. That's just terrible. So I'm just going to go rapid fire through. I'm running out of time. Is America a Christian nation? Should it be? Well, I would say that's extremely definition dependent. I'm going to short answer this and say no. You can go read Greg Boyd's Myth of a Christian Nation if you really want to. Does God appoint governments? What about evil regimes? Okay, this is complicated because it's getting really theological, but I would say, sure, God appointed even Assyria and Babylon, but that doesn't make them good. Okay, that appointment can even be applied to Satan. Here's the pernicious lie that's been propagated for too long. You've probably heard it before. God ordains 3 things in this world: family, the church, and the state. Guess what? That is pernicious because it assumes these ordinations are all of the same quality. Why would we want to try to equate those on the same plane as being ordained in the same way? Sarah asks, who has the right to rule then? Well, as it pertains to like, how are you going to organize society in this way? It's kind of a bit of a strange question because no one does. No one has a right to rule. Only God rules. What does it mean to rule anyway? Why would we try to set up people with a special privilege of position in order to enact things that would normally be immoral for you or I to do and give them permission to do it? I read a Bible that says no man has special privilege of position and morality. Everyone is judged by the same standards. And no one, whether they have a police uniform or are a congressman or a president or as a sheik or whatever positional CEO, whatever you want to call it, nobody is going to be judged by some different kind of moral standard. So that's where we're going to stand, till the day we die on that. And so on what should we base our laws then? Well, political organization and public policy is not something you can just solve for by appealing to a scriptural equation. We have developed political philosophies for eons at this point to understand how best to organize ourselves. So, do we need to have some neutrality in government then? Is that how this is going to work? Well, I don't think that's exactly the best question, whether or not our laws are going to be reflecting Christian values in this regard, or whether they should be neutral. I think instead we need to be asking ourselves a different question. Whence the government itself? Does it need to exist? I would suggest to you that instead of thinking about this in terms of, well, do we have a neutral government or do we have one that is reflecting Christian values? Maybe we should try to understand that the state is founded in rebellion against God. That is the origin story of that is the Tower of Babel, and that's where we get this from. So we get our moral basis for this from the Bible, but we also understand it from the world around us. We've built up an ethical systems in order to help facilitate these sort of things for us. How much time do I have? Am I out? I have a minute. Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to just give one, I guess, two more things. Our moral system certainly should not come from the government. If government has any purpose at all, it is an administration of justice regarding the use of force, and it doesn't even do a good job at that. We can do better than this. We have all the tools necessary in our world today to build a better world. And it is not the state that's going to make it happen. It's going to be you and I who are going to be going out there, interacting together, building churches, building businesses, doing science, engineering, and all of that. So in conclusion, Jesus is Lord, Caesar is not, and the Christian nationalist Christian prince should never be.
Thank you.